Welcome, friends. Welcome to Using Just to Speed Development by Christopher Chicks Hicks. Currently, I am the observability lead at Tubi, but in prior years, I've worked at fun places like Brightroll, OpenX, Telmate, McDonald's Tech Labs, Yahoo, and Uber as a site reliability engineer. But I think the main feature that I bring to you today is that I am a shell user and instructor for the last 35 years, and I found a new and interesting tool that I think you will like. So the tool is called Just, and let's talk about what's great about it. So a lot of folks that have worked with build tools have pulled their hair out fighting with XML, YAML, and JSON. And so there's none of that here. You don't have to worry about it. Uh, you might need therapy, but okay, you don't have to worry about that when using this tool. The other nice thing is that some languages and tools, force you to use tabs or spaces, but Just isn't like that. It's totally agnostic, and we'll see how that works in a little bit. Um, we use a lot of different languages in release engineering, and so being able to use a variety of scripting languages in our build process can be extremely handy, and Just supports that very cleanly. But it also has its own scripting language that is pretty much like normal shell scripting, but with some safer defaults. So we exit on error. We're going to display commands as they're going along, and it's self-documenting. And we're going to show you again how all these things work today. And over time, using Just will let you build up a set of shared tools without littering a lot of script files all over your repo. And it also encourages you to run the same code locally or in your GitHub action. But we're maintaining it in one place, so we're not repeating ourselves. So that's really handy. And the only downside that I've come up with so far is that the oops, not where I'm supposed to be. The only downside so far is that the name of it is sort of inconvenient. And so it is a little bit hard to search for. So we are going to create a new GitHub repo and build everything else today through that. So let's start with our cargo init. So we're going to create the normal Rust hello world here, and let's see how that works for us. Boom, yes, we get hello world back. Life is good. So now let's work with that on top of Just. So we're going to add a very simple just file here. We're going to have one recipe called try because it's the first recipe it's going to run by default. So I could say just try and it will run my hello world for us, but I can just run just. If you know which just each of those was, I'm proud of you. And so the default recipe ran in this case, and so we got our hello world back. And even though we only have one recipe, Just is already letting us get a list of these things back. And so that's pretty handy. Now, throughout today, I'm going to be using some of my Git aliases. The primary one that you're going to see is committing with a message, but we're also going to see status porcelain here, STP, so that we can see which files have changed in our repo without much trouble. So we're going to go ahead and commit this and push so to make sure everything is working. Life is good. So now let's go on to the next stage of the demo. So let's look at what happens with directories. So if we look at our just file now, we see that I've added two new recipes, ls and top ls. Both are running the same command. The obvious difference here is line 4 is the no CD decoration on the ls version of things. And so to make this interesting, we need to get into a subdirectory. And so if we do just ls, it is not going to change directories. So we will see what is in our current directory, the source file of main rs. But if we do just top ls, we're going to see that the default behavior for our recipes in our just file is that they are running from the top of our repo. And so you don't need to worry about odd behavior when things are being run from weird locations. Things are consistently run from the same place, which is a pretty nice default to have. So let's commit that and check out another feature. So we're going to overwrite our just file again because we don't need the ls example left in there anymore. And so now we have check and new dep recipes in our file. Just list is going to show us, boom, now we have these two new recipes listed as well. And this new dep one shows up with crate name. Well, where does that come from? Well, that came from the fact that we actually added that parameter here on line 8 in our file. And so that is going to be an argument, a named argument into our routine, which you can see there on line 9. We use in a substitution to be able to do that cargo add. The other thing that we've added here is a dependency. And so new dep and try are now dependent on check. And so let's look at what check does by itself. We're going to run clippy and test. And so that, oops, sorry, I need to run just check. There we go. Okay, now we get clippy, and test. And so if I run just by itself now, we're going to see that before it goes and does the cargo run, it's going to go take care of that dependency. And again, because if any of these things were broken, it would stop. If we had errors at that point, it would just stop and we wouldn't wipe out that error by continuing and just going and throwing more output in there. So let's go ahead and take advantage of that new dep feature. And so we can do a sanity check before we add this new dependency. We look at which files are changed. We see that the just file changed, as we've already seen, but then the cargo TOML change is just adding that version in there. And so let's go ahead and call that good. We have now done make like dependencies in our just file, and that was not too painful. So another thing that is surprisingly easy in the just world is being able to document yourself. So all I've done now is added a little comment in before each of our recipes. But now when I do just list, that documentation is automatically showing up there. And so that is super handy for all of our users. And so we can say that documentation is easy. Life is good. So we're going to do one more overwrite of the just file. And in this case, I'm going to replace the spaces with tabs in 2 out of the 3 recipes. And so now if I do just check, I see that it's doing the same thing that it was doing before. But I can also do my just, and so we're running a tab delimited recipe for check, and then we're running a space delimited recipe for try, and everything worked and nothing blew up and life is good. And again, we see that the spaces changed with tabs right there, and our just list is still working. So life is good. So let's commit that and move on to one more example. And this time we're going to actually start appending to our file. We're going to build on top of what we already have there. And so this is simply adding a recipe called version. Now, again, we go ahead and document it there so that when we run just list, we can see that the, it's telling us what's happening, and we can figure out what we want to run. And the at before version is going to cause it to suppress the command output. We don't need to show people every time. And if we're building this into something else, then that output could actually get in our way. And so if we run just version, we see that it is simply going to give us that one value out of the cargo TOML file. And to just double check, here we are in the cargo TOML file, and this is the value that's being extracted. So that totally is working. Sadly, I will admit that this is a little bit confusing because there is also just dash dash version, which is going to give you the version of just instead of running the recipe called version. But naming is hard, so what can you do? So we add that into our repo, and we want to do a push at this point because now we're going to get into playing with pull requests. So let's add another recipe to our adjust file. And in this case, we are going to add a recipe called on a branch. Now, on a branch, also, we've set a variable here so that we can reference our release branch and update it in one place in a few places. And so that's convenient. And we're also showing here that we are including a little bash script so that we can apply some more complex logic, and we're going to be able to integrate that into other things that are not bash based. So to see what's happening so far, we'll run just on a branch. And oh no, we're not on a branch. So we get an error message that came from the code that we just added. So we go ahead and create a branch. And now when we run the command, it comes back with no output because it was successful and we can go on with life. And the error output from the whole thing is also correct. So now let's build on that. And we're going to add two more recipes, PR and merge. And so let's look at our just file in a little bit prettier format. So you see we've added a bunch of stuff now. So for our PR create, we're going to look and see if there have been any changes. We're going to push everything up to the upstream, and we're going to use the GitHub CLI command to create a PR. The title and the body of that PR are coming from this variable last commit message, which, as you can see, was a little snippet that somebody had on GitHub and I thought was handy. And then the last recipe we've added is for merging. So we're going to merge the branch and then check back out to our release branch and do a pull so that we can get back to a nice starting place. So if we do a git diff, we see all of that stuff is added there, but we need to go ahead and merge that before, we need to go ahead and commit that before we test any of these things because we need the commit there to be able to build the PR off of. And so now if we do just PR, we watch and tick, 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 we haven't had to go to the web browser at all. And now we have a pull request. The GitHub CLI would let us open up our web browser at this point if we wanted to see things, but we don't need to look at that any further. We can just go ahead and do a merge. Notice we've got the squash merge option there. And so now if I do a git hist, I see, boom, we have a nice, pretty history there with no weird branch stuff. So life is good. So let's go on and add another interesting example. And since we've got these handy things for doing our PRs, we'll just keep doing this on new branches. So we're going to add in a couple of silly examples here. And so you see that we have recipes called Hello Chicks and Howdy Net. One is running a line of Perl, one is running a line of Lua, just to throw some weird fun languages in there for you. And so if we do just Hello Chicks, naturally enough, we get that output, and Howdy Net, we get the output from Lua. And of course, these things are adding to our ever-growing list of recipes. Just does provide a way for you to be able to organize recipes. I'm not going to try and cover that today. But, oh, we tried to create our pull request and we did a little typo. But hey, Just is kind enough to sit there and say, hey, you probably meant to type PR instead of BR since there is no BR recipe. Maybe someday. So, boom. Oh, another typo, but the shell didn't fix that one for me. So we have our second PR now merged. So let's take this to a whole another level now and add a GitHub action. So we're going to create another PR, and we need the directory that the GitHub actions go into. .github/workflows is where these belong. And I'm going to steal a file from another project that I've been working on, and we're going to look at that in more detail in a minute. But let's go ahead and get the PR going. And we want to get this PR going because the GitHub actions take a minute, and we want them to successfully complete before the before we merge it. And so, boom, we have our pull request going, and the GitHub CLI does not give you a huge detailed view of what's going on here, but we can see the status of our new verify, and we see which branch, commit that it's working with. And this little yellow indicator over here is that it's still going. And so we could sit here and watch this over and over again. But the reason that it takes a decent amount of time to be able to do this, even for Hello World program, is because of Windows. The Windows one takes like 45 seconds to a minute to be able to do this, while while the Mac OS and Linux are more in the 15 to 20-second range. So let's look at this GitHub action. So the first part of this is pretty normal. We want to operate on all branches and pushes that are directly to the main branch. And we have the fun strategy of testing on Linux, Windows, or Mac, which is great because we can make sure that we are functioning on operating systems that we're not currently operating in. We could also add architecture here for ARM versus Intel, AMD type stuff. But for now, we're just focused on getting the different operating systems working. And so you get down into the steps. And so a lot of this is de facto sort of stuff that you would see in any Rust or GitHub action sort of thing. So, we have to check out our repo to be able to build anything or work with anything. Then we have this hack for working around a bug in WSL. It'd be nice if this was encapsulated by somebody. Maybe it is, and I just haven't found it yet. And then we get down to line 43. And so this is a feature of Just. You actually have this GitHub action extraction /setup Just, which is going to work across Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. And so that you don't have to deal with the vagaries of all these different operating systems, which you may not know very well. I haven't touched Windows in a long time, so yay, I can just run this and let it take care of it. And then the last two lines are running within the just that we just installed. And so 45 and 46, we're going ahead and checking the just version. We can pin the version that's installed with setup just, but by default, it's going to install the latest version. So just for documentation purposes, let's go ahead and print that out. And then 48 and 49 are where the big win is happening here, in that we are running the just check command. We saw the just check command a lot earlier in the video today. And so as people add features to that, the same thing would be running in your GitHub action as would be running on the local environment, and you wouldn't be editing that in two different places. So let's see if Windows is satisfied now. Yay, we've got our little green check mark. And so let's go ahead and merge that. Life is good. All right. So in conclusion, just reduces developer toil without creating new problems. I'm very happy to see Make evolved into with a tool that really is better than the predecessor, and we've seen a lot of tools that were worse and painful. So this is definitely not that sort of thing in my experience. And as I've mentioned, I think it is great that you can centralize all of your small scripts into one place for a neater repo, and it makes folks more likely to actually use them instead of forgetting about them being scattered hither and yon. I've used Just in 4 different projects, a Hugo project and a Rust project and a DNS control project. And it has been great to work with that whole time. And I'm looking forward to continuing to evolve my Just files to make these projects even easier to work with for people coming along. As you may have noticed, I learned the GitHub CLI as part of being able to figure out how to make all this stuff work. And I've definitely found that that's been handy for me updating my blog, which you can see at www.chicks.net, which I linked to earlier. So I've got a few other links here. The first one is to the Just documentation. I think these are excellent docs. The advice in there is good and they're complete. And I have found the answer for my question over and over again. The GitHub repo is also linked there. I did file an issue with the project a little while ago, and because I was looking for a video to see what the prior art was, and it was so hard to search for, I could not find it on my own, and so that the author was happy to send me a link, and so that was great to be able to see that. I'm truly impressed by the predecessor videos production values. I've got a long way to go there. You're not going to see my face today, for instance, such is life. But I really thought that I could do better in some other ways. I really wasn't excited by the comparison to task file. It worked for that person, but it's not something that I particularly care about at all, so it didn't add much to it for me. And whining about tabs and source code really seems silly to me at this point in my life. So I thought I could set a better example in that regard. And I think I managed to achieve that today. And as you can see there's a link to my GitHub Git aliases. And if you want to steal any of those, of course, you're welcome to them. And these links will also be in the description. I'd like to thank Casey Rodamore for building a lovely tool and a lovely community. It's impressive. In my experience. I also want to give credit to Microsoft for not destroying GitHub. I am so glad that I continue using GitHub in good conscience to this day. Of course, thanks to Vim for continuing to prove that 70s era technology still has relevance to modern computing. And I am appreciative to YouTube for teaching me and so many other people so much. people complain about the bad, but there has been a lot of good for me, and I think for a lot of other people. And super thanks to Figlet and Glow and Tmux for being some of my most favorite and helpful and featureful free software projects. Keep rocking it, folks. I love it. I love it. And as you may have figured out, this is on YouTube. So if you want to feed the algorithm, that'd be great. Every view, like, or comment will encourage the mysterious algorithm to share this with other folks. And even if you don't want it to be shared with other folks, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So feel free to drop me a line or what have you. And thanks for your time and have a great day.